community has been largely making a lot of guides and a lot of tools and a lot of investigative toolkits available to other open source researchers. And I believe that's how we as researchers got to where we are now, because of how everything was available for learning and development. But I think a kind of a proactive involvement of open source researchers in the global South is important. I know that like it is open to people in the global South, but sometimes people think that it's too good to be true. Am I going to learn for years and eventually do it? But a proactive role of involving them from the start when it comes to investigations, because investigative journalism, it hasn't always been relying on open source. It has relied for the most part on closed sources and just intel sometimes that you hear from people or you deduce from a conversation. I like this, along with training, which also, again, organizations do all the time, available training to other journalists and otherwise. But I would say what would make a huge difference is involving people from other professions, because we don't need to always look for journalists to make the pivot. We can always find someone who's already a data scientist and he already has these machine learning capabilities that he can build for either research or monitoring or detection even. So just opening it to all sorts of disciplines, I think, will enrich it in a way that we haven't witnessed in the global South. It's growing, but I think more people who have the interest and perhaps the persistence to keep going at when it comes to learning.
Exactly. And I think of a very interesting question for you now, because you're also a trainer. So if you have 1,000 students sitting in a hall and you were train them and teach them one tool to master it and advise them to master it, what would be that tool for them?
There are a number of them, but I will say that, for example, working on North Africa, for the longest time, the tool that I thought was necessary, especially in mountainous landscapes, is Peak Visor, because of the mountain ridges and how just unique it is. I think also Peak Visor, because of the visualization capacity in it, doesn't give you like half answers or 3/4 of an answer or like just the closest. It's either this is a mountain in question or it isn't. And the interesting thing about Peak Visor is that there is a story that we were working on a ship in Yemen, and we were trying to identify where it was docked. Like, it supposedly had a lot of oil, like 40 ton, and it was an old vessel that might just sink, and that would cause an oil spill, for example. And the only thing we have in the background was an island. So Peak Visor still identified the island itself based on just the silhouette itself of the island, because it has mountains and hills, and it was quite unique. I believe it is one of the most valuable tools. When I worked with lighthouse reports on immigration and the expulsion of sub-Saharan African as well as Sudan migrants to deserts, most of the time they would expel them to the Algerian-Tunisian border, and that area is quite mountainous. There is a mountain everywhere in the background, and that made it a lot more possible to geolocate and identify that these people were put somewhere that is the furthest from civilization, from anything, from hospitals, from transportation. So it was important to show just how far people would go to stop them from, for example, like migrating to Europe using boats and the Central Med.
Exactly. Yeah, interesting. I actually haven't heard of Peak Visor. Like, every day I'm trying to learn a new tool, and it seems a very interesting one. And I will also put the link for this tool and some information in the description of this video. So for whoever is interested, they can look at it. Iman, thank you so much for your time. It was very informative. I learned a lot from you today. And if you have any other advice for people who are very interested in OSINT or trying to know how it works, if you have advice for them, feel free and we'll keep in touch.
Of course. And thanks for having me. This was fantastic. And thanks for giving me also the space to just speak and ramble for an hour now. If there is one advice I would have to other people who are perhaps interested in open source research is to not, because it's easy for me to say it now, but I used to get anxious around it. I think that the fear is what's going to stop people from actually exploring. I would say the only thing that perhaps got me going was just jumping straight into using a tool without even knowing much about it, and then trying to identify the features and what you can use and what it can be used for. Also guides, either by Bellingcat or other open source investigative organizations. There is plenty of material to dive into. And another advice is to not expect it to yield results overnight, because that's not going to happen. But it is doable, and including open source, even in traditional reporting, is a huge advantage now.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.